blinds stuttered against their frame as Claire Dawson lifted them with 2 fingers and peered into the ink-blue dawn. A white and green helicopter bearing federal markings hovered over the field behind her fence, landing lights combing her modest lawn like daylight poured through a keyhole. Neighbors, shoelaces untied, robes flapping, clustered at the cul-de-sac's edge. 2 dark SUVs idled at the curb, silhouettes stepped out, suits, earpieces, steady eyes, fanning to secure the yard. Claire's breath fogged the glass. "Why would they come for me?" she whispered. 3 weeks ago, just a small choice. Stay with me. One choice can change everything. 3 weeks earlier, in the ordinary light of a Tuesday afternoon, at Horizon Getaways, Claire's desk was a topography of other people's adventures. Glossy brochures, a postcard of a glacier-blue lake stamped, "Wish you were here." She often was, only by floor plans and thread counts, never by weight of sheets or dawn views. She took another call. "Horizon Getaways, this is Claire, of course. Connecting through Dallas, vegetarian meal, aisle seat if possible. Congratulations on your anniversary." She smiled into the headset, listening, scribbling, clicking. The couple wanted a veranda stateroom. She mapped it in seconds, the way a pianist finds a chord that fits. "We'll make it effortless," she promised, and she meant it. Nina spun into the chair beside her with the soft chaos of a friend who'd earned the right. "You book dreams," Nina said, tapping the corkboard with a capped marker, "but live none." Claire laughed. "I live plenty. I live vicariously. That's like watching someone else eat cake and calling it dinner." "Maybe I'm on a diet," Claire said, and they both smirked. But when the call ended and the office hum folded over them again, Claire's eyes drifted to that glacier-blue postcard. Her sister's handwriting was a loopy river. "Come to my wedding. Don't you dare say no." She hadn't dared. The plan was simple and frugal, the way Claire did most things. Economy ticket to New Zealand, a dress borrowed from Nina, shoes buffed with a dot of olive oil because it worked, and she could save the $10. She stayed late to finish itineraries for clients who used urgent, the way some people breathe, then shut down her computer and slung her bag over her shoulder. "Wait," Nina said, standing, nervous energy lighting her face. "Before you go." Claire frowned. "What did I forget?" "You didn't," Nina said, and the break room door swung open like a quiet stage curtain. 3 co-workers were there, cheeks pink with the conspiracy of kindness, and a tiny frosted cupcake sat in the middle of the table like an exclamation mark. Beside it, a slim envelope with her name. Claire smiled, suspicious and soft. "What is this?" "Open it," someone said, and she did. And the room tilted. First class. The letters were small and matter-of-fact, but they pulsed as if they had a heartbeat. Her economy seat had been replaced, upgraded with pooled miles, employee discounts, and a determined spreadsheet that, from the looks of Nina's bitten lip, had taken weeks. "We wanted you to have one story that's yours," Nina said. "Right up front. Tell us if the champagne is actually as cold as the brochures say." Claire tried to speak. Her throat did the fragile thing it does when joy arrives unannounced. I can't accept this." "You can," Nina said, "and you will." "You book dreams," another co-worker added, shrugging. "Now go live one." Claire pressed the boarding pass to her chest. For a moment, she saw herself in a cabin with soft lighting and plump duvets, everything padded and quiet the way expensive things are. Then she tucked the pass carefully into her wallet like a photograph of someone she loved. That night, she laid out a simple outfit, set 3 alarms, rinsed a single wine glass until it squeaked, and caught her reflection. 38. Hair pulled back, a thoughtful line between her brows that wouldn't rub away. She paused in the doorway, listened to the small house breathing. Tomorrow I'll finally sit where I've only ever sent people. She paused at the bedroom doorway, listening to small sounds, the refrigerator settling, the tick of a baseboard heater, the neighbor's dog making sleep noises in a yard beyond the fence. She breathed in, and a simple thought rose, spare and bright. Tomorrow I'll finally sit where I've only ever sent people. At the gate, she let time be kind. Screens flipped to boarding soon. She exhaled. That lives in watching. A man sat alone by the window. Scarred skin tugged one eye, stiffened his grip. The air around him had the kind of empty that isn't an accident. A toiletry bag tumbled from the stranger's grip, skittered, unhinged along the carpet. Claire was already on her knees, the motion quick and precise. She gathered a toothbrush still in its wrapper, a comb, a little bottle of unscented lotion. Up close, the scars were simply part of a face, the way freckles or dimples are part of a face. Up close, his eyes were steady and human and a little tired. "Thank you," he said, voice low, careful, as if he'd learned to make words gentle so they wouldn't startle anyone. "I've got it from here." "Of course." She handed him the last fallen thing, his boarding pass. Habit made her glance at it. Last row, middle seat. Flight 813 to Auckland now boarding first class and priority passengers, the gate agent called. Claire slid her hand into her bag and touched the edge of her upgraded pass. Nina's grin lived in the paper. So did a decade of deferred luxuries. She could almost feel the texture of a real glass in her hand, the warm weight of a blanket that had never been vacuum sealed. She looked at the man's hands, at the softened glove of scar tissue that made it hard to grip. She heard a voice, her own, from some unguarded room in her. "Don't overthink it. Just be how you say people should be." She stood. "Sir?" He looked up, wary and polite, the way people do when they're braced for charity to come with a price. "Please, take my seat. You need it more." He blinked, as if the offer itself let in too much light. A dozen answers skittered across his face and fell away. Pride lifted, then set down, like a bird reconsidering a ledge. "I couldn't possibly." "You could," she said, steady. "And today, you should." He swallowed. The scarring pulled at the motion. For a heartbeat, Claire thought she'd overstepped, that she'd turned a man into a symbol against his will. She softened her voice. "No one's doing you a favor. I'm making an exchange, my comfort for your comfort. That's all." His eyes found hers, clear and unguarded now. "Why?" "Because I hope someone would do it for my father," she said, surprising herself with the truth of it. "Because a long flight is long enough without pain you don't have to have. Because..." She smiled, small and real. "Why not?" They walked to the gate together. The agent's eyebrows leaned toward each other, as if they'd been instructed never to do this. "Are you sure, ma'am?" "I'm sure," Claire said, and felt the certainty reach down and lock her knees. The scanner chirped. New boarding passes emerged like magic a child would call honest. The man accepted his and stared at it a moment, absorbing what it meant to be seen not as spectacle but as traveler with needs worth meeting. "Thank you," he said, voice catching once, then finding itself. "I don't have words." "Have the seat," she said. "Keep the silence." She meant, "Your gratitude doesn't owe me anything." As they moved down the jetway, Claire stepped aside to let him go first. He hesitated, then nodded. He disappeared into the soft-lit rectangle that separates economy from everything else. Claire continued down the aisle to a row that felt narrower now, like a hallway you only appreciate when you've moved a sofa through it. The plane filled with the choreography of departure. The closed bins, the click-slap of seatbelts, the murmured apologies elbow trades require. An elderly woman settled next to Claire and, after a few minutes, fell asleep against her shoulder with the trust of someone who'd slept against many daughters' shoulders. Across the aisle, a teenager volleyed bright pixels against a tiny enemy with the volume a few notches too high. Claire adjusted her breathing until it matched the plane's. Half an hour in, a flight attendant paused at Claire's row. "The gentleman in the forward cabin wanted me to pass this along," she said, placing a folded napkin in Claire's palm. The letters leaned on one another. "Thank you for seeing me." She folded the napkin into her passport pocket, the one where she kept her passport and the emergency numbers she'd never used. She imagined Nina's face when she described the champagne bubbles, then decided she'd describe this instead. She wondered for a beat whether anyone would have done the same for her father. Hours lengthen when measured against the rhythm of a cramped body. Claire let them. She accepted the plastic cup of water she would have poured from glass, the dinner whose gravy bore the sincere effort of an industrial kitchen. When she stood to stretch, she drifted forward through the curtain that always felt like a border and saw him. He wasn't transformed. He was simply at ease, a real glass on the tray, a cloth napkin, his shoulders settled as if a long argument in his muscles had paused mid-sentence. He saw her too. A question flickered. "Do you want it back?" And then a recognition, the kind that doesn't require language. She lifted a hand, tiny wave, and he nodded once. Gratitude compressed into emotion so economical it wasted nothing. Back at her seat, the teenager's game finally dimmed. The elderly woman woke, embarrassed, and patted Claire's arm. "You're kind," she said, as if stating an address someone might need later. "Not always," Claire replied, "but I'm trying to be today." Near the end of the flight, with cabin lights lowered and the world beyond the wing a velvet without edges, Claire looked into the window and found herself layered over her own reflection. Tired, blouse wrinkled, hair fallen out of its vague discipline, and underneath it all, a small, peaceful smile she hadn't seen before. Not how I planned to arrive, but no regret. When they landed, the aisle became a river that did what rivers do, moved forward without sentiment. She lost sight of him almost immediately. That felt right. Not every kindness wants a reunion. New Zealand smelled of wet leaves and jet fuel. Her sister's hug fit like always. A week of vows and laughter. She kept first class to herself. The napkin slipped out one morning. She smiled and kept it close. Back home, her life resumed its pace. Keystrokes, itineraries, the occasional emergency that could be solved by a calm voice, and the willingness to sit on hold longer than a reasonable person would. She brought leftover wedding cake to the office and watched Nina eat it in satisfying silence. She thought about telling the story. She didn't. Some things are truer when they live in the chest instead of on a break room table. 3 weeks later, at 5:47 a.m., the house woke her before the alarm did. The window rattled against its frame, a staccato that was not wind. The picture frame on the dresser trembled a small, nervous tremble. For a second, a lifetime of California drills rose in Claire's body. Door frame, cover your neck, ride it out, earthquake. And then the sound separated into blades, into the distinct whoop-whoop a heart would recognize, if it had ever watched a border between quiet and arrival being crossed. She lifted the blinds. White-green rotor wash turned the field into a false dawn. Suits and uniforms moved with practiced calm. Of people who wore readiness like a second skin, Claire's breath condensed onto the glass. She wiped a circle clear with the heel of her hand. "This can't be for me," she said to the room that had never been asked to host anything more notable than a winter draft. The front door sounded 3 professional knocks that made the wood understand its job. She looked around her living room as if it might volunteer an explanation. A stack of magazines about places that wanted her money. A laptop asleep under a to-do list. A coffee mug that said "Be nice," which felt on the nose now. She was still in her oldest pajamas, hair persuasive in its refusal to obey. At the door stood a man who could have been typecast as reliable without an audition. "Ms. Dawson?" He held up identification, whose seriousness needed no translation. "We're sorry for the early hour. You have visitors who would like to speak with you. Could you be ready in 15 minutes? "Visitors?" Her mouth worked around the word, testing its edges. "For me?" "Yes, ma'am." She nodded, because nodding is something you can do when your brain is balancing 4 explanations and none of them hold. In the bedroom, she pulled on jeans and a navy sweater, ran a brush through her hair until it agreed to collaborate, then looked out the kitchen window. The helicopter had settled. Its rotors slowed like an enormous metronome remembering an older tempo. Figures in dress uniforms stood clustered near the landing site, shapes against the morning, formal and human at once. The agent walked her across the dew-laced grass. The neighbors had gathered at the end of the street, a clot of curiosity contained by a cruiser and a gentle arm. Claire's sneakers darkened with each step. Directly ahead, a tall man broke from the cluster and started toward her. Even at a distance, the right side of his face told a story she recognized. Up close, the story was more complicated. A dress uniform, ribbons arranged with geometry that meant more than color, posture that carried both authority and ease. He stopped a respectful distance away and removed his cap. His hair was military short, the silver at his temples more declaration than apology. He extended his hand. "Ms. Dawson," he said, "I'm Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Reeves. We met in a fashion on a flight some weeks back." The yard seemed to tilt. A recalibration, the way a camera lens snaps into focus. Claire took his hand and felt a strength that was not the denial of injury, but its integration. You were traveling for treatment," he supplied gently. "Yes." His eyes searched hers, not for recognition but for permission to continue. "My unit was ambushed overseas. The building we were in was compromised." He let the passive voice do the work that it sometimes does for memory. "Every soldier in my command made it out. I carried the fire. That was a trade I'd make again." He glanced toward the helicopter, then back to her. "It's an unusual visit," he said. "I spoke about a stranger's kindness at a ceremony. The right ears heard." Claire felt the ground under her shoes, ordinary earth making itself available to something extraordinary. "I gave up a seat," she said, small in the saying. "That's all." "Sometimes that's all it takes," he replied. "May I show you something?" He gestured toward the helicopter, then paused. "But only if you're comfortable." She looked back at her house. Coffee cup, unmade bed, the list she'd written the night before. Change air filter, call Mrs. Klein about Rome, pick up dry cleaning. Then she looked at the man whose face had learned 2 geographies and still managed to be one. "I'm comfortable," she said, surprising herself with how true it was. They walked together, a small procession of two inside a larger one of protocol. Up close, the aircraft was less machine than environment. Leather, polished wood, the subdued hum of systems doing quiet work. A crew member offered a hand Claire didn't need, but took anyway, because some gestures are as much about acknowledging dignity as preventing falls. Inside, the seats held the soft promise of things made to cradle instead of merely contain. "Where are we going?" she asked, settling across from Reeves, who wore the uniform's geometry like it had been drafted for him. He smiled, an expression that edged past the scars with something like victory. "First stop is a nearby base. From there, we'll board another aircraft. We'd like to offer you a different kind of tour." "I don't understand," she said, and it wasn't complaint, but an honest vacancy she trusted him to fill. "At a ceremony last week," he said, "I received our nation's highest award for valor." He stated it the way a man might state his height, a fact he couldn't change and hadn't sought. During my remarks, I mentioned a woman who gave up a seat she had waited a lifetime to sit in. I described what it did to me, that simple act, that it said I was not a monster to be looked away from, but a person to be looked at. It mattered. To me. To those listening. He tilted his head, not quite a bow. People who plan experiences decided it was time you had one. Claire held his gaze, the way you do when you realize gratitude has more moving parts than you thought. "This is a lot," she said, a little breathless laugh on the last word. "It is," he agreed. "And it's still less than what you gave, if you measure by the weight it lifted." The aircraft rose, a gentle assertiveness that made Claire's stomach float for a second, and then settle. The town receded, the grid of streets revealing itself as a suggestion rather than a rule. At the base, they transferred to a sleek jet whose interior looked like someone had asked comfort and function to dance, and they'd said yes, a long yes. Crew greeted Claire with a courtesy that did not feel performative. Reeves sat across from her, not as benefactor, but as witness. "If you need anything," a crew member said, "you need only ask." "I won't know what to ask for," Claire admitted. "Then ask for surprise," Reeves said. "It's a good currency." They lifted into the day and turned toward an island that had lived in Claire's brochures for years, pages dog-eared by strangers with different lives. As the coastline appeared, a thin green script written on blue, Claire felt the oddest sensation. Not that she was about to arrive, but that some part of her was finally catching up. The resort was reserved for service members and their families, but today it made room for a civilian whose resume contained only kindness. At check-in, a woman in a crisp blouse slid across a keycard in a quiet ceremony that eclipsed anything a red carpet could have managed. The room was simple and beautiful, a window assembling ocean and sky like two halves of a thought. They didn't fill her hours with opulence. They salted them with access. "See that range? No tourist flights here," a crew member said. "A private museum pass before opening, then a helicopter over training grounds. Banking left. Hidden pool at 2 o'clock, the pilot called, and the world tipped to a secret waterfall. "This is what heaven must look like," Claire said before she could edit it into something clever. Reeves nodded. "It's what I thought when I first saw it," he said. "After surgery, before going back to work, it reminded me what we're for." Late afternoon, on a beach closed to the public, Claire walked where the tide drew lace on the sand and erased it kindly. She breathed the saline of other centuries. No one needed anything from her. No one was measuring time in billable hours or loyalty points. She sat and let the sun press a hand to her shoulder. The thought came simple and undesigned. I'm finally living one small part of what I've given away to others. She thought the surprises were over, until the table for two appeared on an empty shore. At sunset, they set a small table on a quiet stretch of shore. Nothing theatrical, just linen that behaved itself in the breeze and two plates that made good on their promises. Reeves told her a version of his story that belonged to him and not the newspapers. The noise, the heat, the way leadership feels like carrying a key you didn't ask for. He spoke of his men in the present tense because love and responsibility refuse past tense, even when the calendar insists. When dessert came and the light thinned to gold, he said, "The treatment's gone well. Better than any of us dared say out loud. There's one more round scheduled next month." He met her eyes, steady. "I've already booked 2 seats up front. The second is yours if you'll take it. My medical team thinks a familiar face and a steady presence would help. I think they're right." She laughed once, softly. "I'm not family. I'm not anything, really." "You're the person who saw me," he said. "There are titles higher than that?" She looked at the horizon, that ancient line that never fails to arrive where you need it. "I'll come," she said, "if only to keep the champagne honest." He grinned, and the grin made room for both halves of his face. They flew back under a sky rinsed clean by the night winds. On the tarmac, ground crews moved like a well-practiced sentence. No wasted words, no wasted motion. Reeves walked a half step slower than the uniform expected, not from hesitation, but from that new humility people earn the hard way. When they said goodnight, he didn't shake her hand. He touched his cap and inclined his head, a gesture that made space between ceremony and friendship, and honored both. Back in her house, Claire set her keys in the dish by the door and leaned against the frame, as if it were a person who could take some of the weight. The refrigerator hummed. The clock over the stove thudded one honest minute into the world. She laughed once, softly. It sounded like surprise exhaling. On the doormat, a package waited, taped with a precision that made her think of checklists. She brought it to the kitchen table and cut it open with the carefulness she usually reserved for thin-skinned fruit. Inside, a model helicopter, white and green, detailed enough that when she lifted it, the rotors clicked faintly, as if they were remembering something. Beneath it, a card in handwriting she recognized from its steadiness. "You collect kindness, not luxury." Dr. Claire set the model on the table and watched it for a moment, the way you do with a thing that is about to become a symbol, whether it wants to or not. The carpet carried the faint smell of morning dew the landing had kicked up that day, as if memory itself had a way of lingering in threads. In the office the next morning, Horizon Getaways breathed its usual industrious breath. Phones chirped, printers cleared their throats, co-workers greeted each other with weather and pieces of their lives edited for public consumption. Claire arrived early, as she always did, because some habits are how you thank the day for being possible. She placed the model helicopter on her desk, beside the line of postcards, a new member in a family of flat promises. Nina arrived and stopped, mid-shrug-off coat. "Okay," she said, eyes moving from Claire to the model and back. "Tell me this is a very convincing souvenir, and not a confession that the federal government visited your lawn." Claire smiled. "It's stranger than it sounds," Claire said. She told the airport story, the napkin, then stopped. Nina's eyes warmed. "You did good. Clients called. Flights were booked. Someone dropped a stack of brochures with a clatter that made 3 people say, 'You okay?' at once. The day made its progress." Around noon, a couple wandered in without an appointment, their fingers loosely linked like a rope that didn't need to prove it could hold. Claire helped them plan a trip to a small town in Spain where the tomatoes taste like they've been told the truth. She slid across a printout with options and drew circles around the details that would matter in a week, but that people never think about today. When they left, Nina tapped the model helicopter. "You keeping this here?" Claire nodded. "It belongs next to the postcards. It connects them." "To what?" "To something that isn't bought," Claire said. "To the idea that the best stories don't require a confirmation number." When the office emptied for lunch, Claire stayed. She rested her chin on her folded hands and looked at the tiny helicopter. In its polished rotors, she saw a round reflection of her own face, distorted just enough to look like a stranger she might want to know. She closed her eyes. Images rose uncalled: a cloth napkin on a tray table, a waterfall the color of song, Reeves's smile tipping past the border of scars. A question surfaced, bare and clean. How many moments have I missed because I was counting the wrong things? Near closing time, a man called in a rush to book a last-minute flight to see his mother. Claire unrushed him. She asked the right questions, and one small one that wasn't necessary but was kind. "Do you want a seat where you can stand up often?" He exhaled, astonishment at being considered, not just serviced. "Yes," he said. "Please." As the evening folded, Reeves's number appeared on Claire's phone. It wasn't labeled as such. It was a string of digits that had appeared a day earlier with a text. "Landing soon. Thank you again." He didn't call to update her on protocol or medical appointments. He called to ask simply, "How are you?" "I'm okay," she said. "How are you?" "I've had stranger mornings," he said, and she laughed. He told her the date of the next procedure, the time the car would come, the airport they'd use. "We'll take it slow," he said. "We'll let the day shape us instead of the other way around." "Good," Claire said. "I'm learning how." They were quiet a moment. On his end, she heard the soft clink of glass on wood, the ordinary sound that reminds you heroes are humans with kitchens. "Claire?" he said. "Yes." "Sometimes the greatest gift is being seen." She closed her eyes. "I know." They said goodnight. After she hung up, Claire turned off her monitor and the office went dark except for the eyes of a dozen status lights. She picked up the model helicopter and turned it in her hands so its shadow moved over the postcards like a slow eclipse. She placed it in front of the glacier blue lake her sister had sent. The two images touched. One of a place she'd wanted, one of a moment she'd been given. That weekend, Claire visited her father at the care home. He was knitting his brow into a choice between two television channels that were playing the same news at different volumes. "Hey, Dad," she said, and he smiled the way a room lights when the right person walks in. She told him the story in pieces he could hold. His good hand patted hers. His other hand, stiff, intransigent, lay on the armrest like a stubborn animal that had finally agreed to lie down. "You did good," he said. 4 syllables that had to pass through old pride and new humility to arrive where she could hear them. On the morning of the next flight, Claire woke before the alarm. She wore the same blouse she'd bought for her sister's wedding trip, not because she believed in luck, but because she believed in continuity. The car arrived. She carried a small bag. At the curb, Reeves stood in a civilian jacket over a plain shirt, an outfit that made him look like a man you might ask for directions and trust the answer. He opened the car door for her because he was that kind of precise. "Ready?" he asked. More than I should be, she said, and he smiled. The airport corridor to the gate was the same as it always is. Carpet with a pattern designed to hide stains, announcements from a voice that has never been late for a shift, people moving in half-focused toward places they'd chosen or had chosen them. But something had changed in the space between Claire's ribs. The napkin in her purse was still there. She didn't need to look at it to feel it. They boarded early. The seat up front was startling in its kindness to the human frame. Claire ran her fingers along the armrest as if reading a sentence in Braille. Reeves watched her with quiet approval, like a teacher who enjoys watching a student enjoy a book. "You okay?" "I will be," she said. "But first I'm going to press every button I'm allowed to press." "Good," he said. "We're here to be allowed." The cabin door closed. The aircraft pushed back. The cabin settled. "Your seat changed something permanent," he said. "Good," she smiled. "Then we traded." "Good," she said. "Then we traded." "What did you trade?" "Thinking the good seat was the point," she said. And they both laughed, and the laughter rose with the nose of the plane and leveled out exactly where it should. Hours later, after consultations and gentle jokes with nurses and the quiet efficiency of a team that had practiced hope into muscle memory, Claire sat in a waiting area where the chairs were too clean to be called comfortable. She watched the door through which Reeves had gone. She didn't pray exactly, but she kept her attention near something like it. When the doctor came, he was the kind of person who would have made a good neighbor. He said the words people want to hear. As expected, maybe a little better. She exhaled a shelf of air she hadn't realized she'd stored. "Thank you." "You're welcome," he said, but his eyes added, "Thank you for being here." Evening folded around the city. They flew home the next day, the kind of tired that isn't depletion but release. On the drive from the airport, Reeves looked out the window at ordinary houses doing their unremarkable work of sheltering tenderness. "I used to feel like I had to earn every kindness," he said, almost to the glass. "Now I think I only have to recognize it." Claire nodded. Recognition is a skill. They pulled up in front of her house. The yard looked like itself, which is the best gift a yard can give. Reeves helped her carry nothing, because she had nothing heavy. At the door, she turned. "Thank you for bringing me into the part of your life that is not the headlines." He shrugged, which in his case meant not dismissal but humility's favorite motion. "Thank you for walking me back to mine." He lifted a hand in goodbye and started toward the car. Claire called after him, "Hey!" He pivoted. "Yes?" "If you ever need someone to read the fine print before you sign anything, that's my superpower." He smiled, not politely, but like gratitude has a sense of humor. "I know who to call." He drove off. She straightened the model helicopter toward the glacier blue postcard. 2 promises, 1 direction. If kindness matters to you, like, share, and subscribe. Tell me your small choice stories below.